The following rewrite follows your rule, written in English, exactly the same meaning, no added or removed words, one single continuous line, no line breaks, no bullet points. Here is the rewritten text. The city of Lighthouse, a vast coastal urban area in the Northwest, has long carried a history woven with mysterious and unbelievable events. And although it is famous for its ancient architecture and long-standing haunted legends, it is the recent reality glitches and ghostly sightings that make the city particularly terrifying in the minds of the locals. And among those strange stories, the incident that happened on bus route number 79 has become a spine-chilling tale that no one working in the transportation industry dares to forget. Anthony Clark, who has been tied to the bus steering wheel for nearly 15 years, always considered the last shift after midnight the worst. As the bus leaving the Lighthouse City Central Station right after 12 was a peculiar journey caught between two timelines. Too early for night shift workers getting off, and too late for anyone who needed to wake up early the next day, resulting in the lower cabin often being filled with passengers who were either extremely drunk or under the influence of substances far stronger and more dangerous. Tonight was no exception, and Anthony carefully steered the old double-decker bus through the quiet streets as streetlights cast long shadows across the glass, with only 3 scattered passengers left in the lower cabin, all of them keeping their heads down, trying to avoid eye contact and any possible interaction, their habit being to remain silent and wait for the intoxicated partygoers to disperse along the route. With only 10 minutes left before reaching the final stop, Anthony began to relax as the bus rolled through a peaceful neighborhood, the steady engine humming like a lullaby. And he muttered to himself, "Thank God for a rare trouble-free ride." But just as that fleeting sense of relief touched him, a sharp, chilling scream tore through the silence, coming from the spiral staircase leading to the upper deck. Instinctively, Anthony slammed the brakes and pulled over, his heart pounding as unease washed over him, and he glanced into the small periscope mirror used to monitor the upper cabin, only to see a young woman, the only passenger upstairs, twisting and struggling violently in her seat, her body contorted, arms raised as if fighting off some invisible force restraining her, looking at first like someone experiencing a severe seizure or a medical emergency, prompting Anthony to shout, "Everyone stay seated," before rushing up the stairs. And as he approached the empty, cold rows of seats, he noticed something strange. The girl was fully conscious and seemingly in control of her actions, not unconscious but trapped, as though held down by an unseen force, her eyes wide with terror, her face pale, her screams fading into exhausted sobs. When Anthony leaned over to help free her and touched her arm, the horror unfolded. He realized something was clutching her opposite arm. A human hand, but not a normal one. A hand charred and deformed, almost nothing but a shriveled black mass with thin, twisted fingers like dry branches. And the sight sent Anthony stumbling backward in shock, slamming into a seat, watching in absolute terror as the grotesque hand slowly loosened its grip, pausing as though observing him like a sentient creature before silently retreating straight into the seat cushion and frame behind the girl, disappearing completely without leaving a tear or any physical trace. Once freed, the girl collapsed into Anthony's arms, trembling uncontrollably, dark red marks imprinted on her pale skin where the burnt hand had held her. And a faint acrid smell of smoke lingered before fading, the only physical evidence of the horrifying encounter they had just survived, leaving Anthony Clark with decades of experience, knowing he had never witnessed anything that could explain what had happened, and that this incident was merely the prelude to far stranger events in Lighthouse City. The city of Lighthouse, nestled along the northwestern shore and facing directly toward the vast Irish Sea, proudly stands as one of the oldest and largest settlements in the kingdom. And with such a long history, It is no surprise that this expansive community holds countless tales of ghosts and supernatural encounters, from the ghostly page boy wandering the corridors of the Adelphi Hotel to the phantom priest at the Speak Hall, making it a place not lacking in residents from the other world. However, the city of Lighthouse is also home to a stranger and lesser-known phenomenon within the broader category of paranormal events, namely the time slips and reality glitches, closely tied to the city's public transportation network, with a significant number of unexplained incidents reported, all directly involving modern vehicles and routes that should have no connection to past events. And yet they continue to host mysterious encounters with entities that seem to defy all reasonable explanation. Reports often describe beings and figures that appear beside ordinary citizens trying to travel through the city. And more troublingly, these ghosts or apparitions often choose to interact directly with other passengers, causing panic and deep distress. Among these strange entities stands out the image of a young girl with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing traditional Victorian attire, who frequently appears before many passengers on bus route number 10, described as mischievous and fond of pranks, with numerous witnesses recounting that she delighted in poking the faces of sleeping passengers to wake them up and then vanishing right before their eyes, leaving behind no physical trace of her presence. Even on Route 79 itself, the same route where Anthony Clark recently faced the horrifying burnt hand, there have been many reports of faceless spirits, ghosts lacking any facial features entirely, with their face area completely smooth and blank, always appearing alone, keeping distance from other passengers, and remaining silent when approached. With some of these blank-featured figures documented by the Lighthouse City police after terrified bus drivers called for help, and when officers approached, these faceless shadows would flee and vanish from sight, despite having no physical escape route available. These events have created a set of transportation legends in Lighthouse City, suggesting that their public vehicles may be spiritual hotspots or points of intersection between dimensions. But perhaps the most shocking and terrifying incident ever recorded on Route 79 occurred on a January afternoon in 1961, an event that deeply affected many witnesses, so horrifying that it solidified its place within the already vast collection of supernatural legends of Lighthouse City. That day carried a bone-chilling cold despite the clear sky and bright sunshine, and shortly after noon, a bus was traveling along Wavertree High Street, taking passengers away from the city center, with Anthony Clark at the wheel, though he was not the usual driver for the route and had been assigned last minute due to several drivers falling sick with a spreading stomach illness. The bus carried a relatively full load of passengers distributed across both decks, and everything began like any ordinary afternoon service until Anthony encountered an unexpected detour ahead, where in the middle of the road in front of the Thatch House pub stood a lone metal sign directing him to turn right onto Prince Alfred Road. He began turning while announcing the route change to the passengers, immediately earning groans and complaints as the detour would lengthen their journey. But Anthony simply sighed and continued driving, only to travel a short distance down Prince Alfred Road before the engine suddenly died without warning, leaving the bus completely immobilized at the intersection with Hunter's Lane. As passengers grew restless behind him, Anthony attempted to restart the engine when he suddenly noticed a figure standing just outside the bus door, pausing his efforts to look up at the strange figure. Confused to see someone wearing a dark hooded cloak and a black mask covering the entire face. And even more alarming were 8 other identical figures standing scattered around the bus, forming a ring around it. Then, without warning, the one outside the door suddenly appeared right beside Anthony, having somehow entered the driver's cabin despite the closed doors. And when Anthony stood to object to this intrusion, the hooded figure ordered him to sit down with a dismissive wave, and Anthony realized he could do nothing but obey, as though under some kind of spell, and that was the last thing he remembered before losing consciousness completely. As soon as Anthony Clark collapsed into his seat and fell unconscious, a wave of panic erupted inside the bus cabin, with the conductor and passengers shouting, protesting, and condemning what was happening, as the intrusion of a mysterious cloaked figure, combined with the incapacitation of the driver, was a blatant violation of their sense of safety. And the shouting and chaos spread quickly, prompting several more cloaked figures to appear mysteriously among the crowd, not entering through the doors or climbing the stairs, but simply materializing inside the bus, standing among the cramped rows of seats as if stepping out of thin air, with a total of about 7 or 8 figures now present inside, creating an overwhelming and threatening presence. These entities did not use physical force in any conventional way, but instead merely gestured or issued spoken commands to the shouting passengers. Their actions not aggressive yet terrifyingly coercive. And whenever one of the cloaked figures raised a hand or spoke, the targeted passenger immediately ceased all resistance. The conductor, an older and experienced man, attempted to retreat to the back of the bus to make a phone call, but one of the cloaked figures stopped him with a sharp wave of its hand, causing him to stumble, his mouth opening to protest, but producing only a weak groan before he fell heavily into a seat, his head tilting to one side as he slipped into a deep sleep or unconsciousness. This scene repeated itself as the cloaked figures moved slowly and methodically through both levels of the bus, not rummaging, not stealing, and showing no signs of typical criminal behavior, their sole purpose seemingly to immobilize every passenger. A woman on the upper deck, who had witnessed Anthony Clark's horrifying encounter with the burnt hand the night before, attempted to throw her handbag at one of the entities, but before it left her grip, another cloaked figure appeared beside her, the woman freezing, her eyes widening in a vacant stare before her arm fell limply and her eyes closed. The hooded figures operated with cold precision, as though wielding an irresistible power capable of forcing victims into a trance-like state with nothing more than a gesture or a simple command. And one by one, the shouting, resisting, or even quietly seated passengers were subdued, leaving the once panicked bus transformed into a moving mausoleum where every passenger and staff member sat motionless and unresponsive. However, there was one exception. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah, shy and slower to react than others, acted out of pure survival instinct, slipping down and curling herself behind a double seat on the lower deck to make herself invisible, holding her breath as the cloaked figures passed by, listening to the unnatural silence that followed. Realizing everyone else had been incapacitated and she was the only one still conscious, Sarah knew she had to act immediately, sliding out from her hiding place with her heart pounding as she sprinted toward the middle exit, the emergency door Anthony had opened when he pulled over. Escaping the cursed bus, Sarah ran as fast as she could along North Church Road, not daring to look back until the sound of her own footsteps and ragged breaths drowned everything else out. And when she finally turned, a fresh wave of terror struck her as 2 hooded figures were chasing her, moving with astonishing speed despite their heavy attire. Fortunately, in the distance she spotted the familiar silhouette of a patrolling police officer walking along the road, appearing to be on a routine patrol. And Sarah screamed, her voice cracked with fear and exhaustion, begging him for help and pointing back toward the stranded bus. When she and the officer looked back down the road, another strange occurrence unfolded. The 2 cloaked figures had vanished, not ducking into an alley or rounding a corner, but simply no longer there. Despite their sudden disappearance, the girl's distress and urgent account convinced the officer, who calmed her and instructed her to enter a nearby shop and call the local police station before heading on foot toward the bus. Reaching the intersection with Hunter's Lane, where the bus sat motionless, he witnessed the strangest scene of his career. The double-decker bus standing alone with all 9 cloaked figures who had surrounded it now completely gone. Entering the bus, he found Anthony Clark and all the passengers still seated in a clear state of stupor, with no signs of violence or injury, but frozen like wax figures. And with patience and effort, he began waking them one by one, each taking minutes to regain consciousness as if struggling with temporary memory loss of the events. And once their memories slowly returned, they became emotional or agitated as they recalled the mysterious hooded figures that had subdued them. The officer began his preliminary investigation on the spot, asking Anthony, now recovered enough to drive again, why he had taken this road since it was not part of the standard route. And Anthony calmly explained about the detour sign near the Thatch House pub. However, when the officer went to inspect the Thatch House pub, he found no detour sign at all, the only physical trace of their misguided journey having been completely erased. From now on, rewrite this in English exactly as written in one continuous line with no added or removed words and no line breaks. In the years since the mysterious encounter on Wintry Street, many local commentators and paranormal investigators have attempted to explain the strange details of the incident, the event with the mass incapacitation of passengers and the disappearance without a trace of both the cloaked entities and the detour sign has generated a series of hypotheses ranging from rational explanations to speculations about other dimensions, rational hypotheses. Some commentators suggest that the entire incident may have been just a prank or an elaborately staged performance targeting the passengers, possibly carried out by the driver, Anthony Clark, and some unidentified accomplices. This hypothesis argues that the prank was quickly aborted and covered up when one of the passengers, the 16-year-old girl, Sarah, became so terrified that she sought police intervention, the absence of the detours. And could be evidence that Anthony's accomplices had time to remove it immediately after the bus stopped. Other arguments land towards similar scenarios, such as an impromptu performance by local actors or student, perhaps part of an art project or strangest social experiment. These individuals may have used cloaks and black masks to create a drama. Their sudden disappearance might be explained by realizing the plan had collapsed when a passenger's fear exceeded expectations, forcing them to retreat quickly and secretly into nearby alleyways. However, this theory struggles to explain how the entities could materialize inside the bus while the doors remained closed. Another more criminally inclined speculation is that this could have been an attempted robbery or not. Her crime method was abandoned. The perpetrators might have used chemical sedatives or some type of special gas, which could explain the faint burn smell linked to the scorched hand incident if the two events are connected to incapacitate the victims. However, the lack of missing or searched belongings dismisses this motive. The criminals may have abandoned their plan upon realizing the young girl had escaped to call the police. Finally, some proposed that the incident may have been the result of a form of collective hallucination or mass hysteria, the unwanted row. UTEC during a routine trip created general anxiety. From that anxiety, as small events such as a group of cloaked people walking by might have been amplified by the tenseness of the passengers, triggering a chain reaction and causing them to fall into a collective trance, a psychological mechanism to escape a stressful situation. Supernatural and interdimensional hypotheses. Although rational explanations have been proposed, none succeed in addressing the most disturbing details of the story, particularly the extraordinary abilities the cloaked Phi Gurasi med to possess. These entities were described as capable of passing through matter. They entered the bus and appeared among the passengers, despite the closed doors and absence of a physical entry point. Incapacitating by will, they could place victims into a state of unconsciousness or stupor with a simple gesture or command without physical force. These abilities opened the door to the Uris beyond the ordinary world, raising questions about their true origins. Were they beings who traveled from a distant past or far future, or were they not from Earth? Atal, The strongest and most frightening hypothesis focuses on the idea that the cloaked entities were interdimensional travelers having accessed our reality through a weakness in the fabric of space and time. This explains their ability to pass through matter. They did not need doors because they do not fully exist in our dimension, and their ability to override consciousness. They may have used technology or psychic abilities far beyond human understanding. Furthermore, if the scorched hand incident on Route 79 the night before was part of the same phenomenon, it suggests a fragility in the boundaries of reality in Lighthouse City. The burnt hand may have belonged to another creature attempting to enter our reality, but only part of its body crossed the boundary. Their purpose incapacitating Anthony Clark and the passengers remains an unsolved mystery. Were they collecting data on human reactions? Were they performing a ritual requiring the absolute silence of involuntary participants? Or perhaps the incapacitation was merely a side effect of a much more complex process. The reality overlap zone. Wintry Street incident is only one of many strange events across Merseyside, including time slips and reality glitches recorded in other areas. Most notably Thingwall Village and the infamous Bold Street is Lighthouse City, located in a place where the boundaries between adjacent realities or timelines are unusually weak, and what dangers might await those who are unlucky enough to slip through these invisible cracks. The story of Bus 79 and the hooded figures is not merely a supernatural anecdote, but evidence of deeper mysteries leading just Benny, a everyday life in Lighthouse City, showing that sometimes the roads we travel daily may intersect with dimensions beyond our imagination. The Bis incident on Wintry Street, though repeatedly forced into logical explanations or dismissed as outlandish, the Ories has left deep and permanent scars in the community of Lighthouse City, especially on those who directly through the night bear invisible scars for Anthony Clark, the bus driver who witnessed both the scorched hand incident and the overpowering display of the cloaked entities. His life was never the same. He tried to continue his job. Each time he sat behind the wheel, his eyes instinctively searched for a glimpse of a black cloak. At intersections or strange passengers boarding, the psychological damage was devastating, leaving him struggling with anxiety disorders and agoraphobia, a common response among those whose personal space has been violated. Though he eventually sought professional help, the memory of the hollow-eyed passengers and the silent commands of the hooded figures haunted him for years. Similarly, the passengers, after being awakened from their entrance state, faced tremendous psychological shock. It took them minutes to recall what had happened to Formovs. Elective amnesia covering the period of paralysis followed by emotional outbursts. Since the memories of the cold hooded figures flooded back, the incident shattered their sense of safety and caused them to question the nature of reality. Many avoid public transport entirely, especially at night, creating a quiet wave of anxiety throughout Lighthouse City's transit system. The young girl Sarah, the only conscious witness and the one who escaped, became the central figure in the story. Her testimony was the most crucial evidence, especially her account of B, then chased by the hooded figures who then vanished without a trace. However, relentless attention from the media and skeptics forced her into seclusion. Although hailed as a hero for calling the police, she bore the burden of being the only one who had seen the entire truth. At Ruth, few dared to accept a new legend of Lighthouse City. At first, authorities attempt to close the case by labeling it mass hysteria or an organized hoax. But the consistency in the testimonies from the driver, the conductor, and passengers even thought their memories resurfaced only after Awa, Kenningan, the complete absence of any physical evidence, the detour sign the attacker's footprints or traces made the case one of the coldest and most baffling files in Lighthouse City police history. The story of the Wintry Street bus incident quickly spread beyond local newspapers, becoming a new urban legend. It was added not only to the city's catalog of hauntings, but also to the category of interdimensional anomalies. The event reinforced the belief that the Merseyside area, including Lighthouse City, Wintry Street, Thingwall, and Bold Street, was a convergence point, where the barriers between dimensions thinned drastically. The scorched hand and the cloaked entities might not be ghosts at all, but tangible signs of a parallel reality pressing against our own. Paranormal researchers began swarming Lighthouse City, proposing that Bus 79 may have accidentally driven into an energy vortex or a temporary time portal. The hooded beings with mind-nullifying abilities could be gatekeepers protecting the portal, or advanced entities running clandestine experiments using humans as test subjects to study their reactions when forced into altered states of consciousness. The most persistent question remains, what was their purpose? Why incapacitate everyone? Ytharm Noon. The act was not destructive, but controlling, leading to a chilling possibility. Perhaps the deities did not intend to take anything from our world, but to place something into it. A message, a technology, or a spiritual influence delivered, while every witness remained silent and vulnerable. Today, Bus 79 still runs its daily route, and although the story has faded into history, new drivers are ill-warned of the black-cloaked legend whenever they pass Wintry Street. The incident serves as a reminder that in an ancient city like Lighthouse City, familiar roads can sometimes lead directly into places where logic fails and reality bends under forces far beyond human understanding. And when night falls, anyone riding the last bus cannot help but glance up at the upper deck, wondering whether a hooded figure or a scorched hand might be waiting to reassert its claim over this world. Every story is just another whisper in the dark. If you've experienced something truly terrifying, send it to Dark Whispers Audio. Let your story be told in the night. Subscribe now, for the darkness still holds many secrets.